Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm Josh Dreyfus, and today, by request of YouTube commenter Dark Flame Master Death, we're counting down the top 10 oldest MMORPGs. The MMORPG genre is older than most people realise, so today we're going to take a trip back through time and discover where the genre came from. I've been working on a documentary called Our Virtual World, a history of the MMORPG, chronicling the very beginnings. You can go watch each episode on my channel for free as it comes out, but today, let's take a look at the oldest of the old. Before we go full on blast from the past, if you could do me a massive favour and like the vid, sub to the channel and ring the bell, your support is the only thing that makes these videos possible. Some of these games are still online today, but most came and went, advancing the genre in some way or other, but ultimately arriving years before their time. These were the pioneers of the online game and laid the way for generations to come. With all that sorted, let's journey into the past and discover the top 10 oldest MMORPGs. At number 10, Ultima Online, 1997. The Ultima series of games were absolutely groundbreaking in many ways, with many people considering Ultima 1 to be the very first open-world game. The Ultima series was created by English game designer Richard Garriott and spanned an impressive 9 games, but the one we're most interested in is Ultima Online. The online world hadn't yet been conquered, and Richard brought his dry British wit and humour to it as he assumed the role of Lord British, his in-game persona, and invited us all to explore the isometric world of Ultima Online. It was brutal and unforgiving, almost fully PvP. Rules and laws were made mostly by players, and griefing was rife, but those that did play still remember it as a great old time. And if you're sad you missed out on that brutal gameplay, then don't be. It's still online and you can go and play for free right now. It should also be noted that Richard Garriott is considered the grandfather of the MMORPG genre because he's the guy who actually came up with the acronym MMORPG. So every time you say it, think of Lord British. Number 9. Tibia, 1997. If you like your camera top down and your graphics made of square tiles, then you'll love Tibia. As is the trend with older games, this game is very hard, and survival in Tibia was a constant struggle, with roving enemies able to rip you to shreds and other players having no real reason to help you. Life in Tibia wasn't pleasant, but for those strong few who survived it, it was one of the first MMORPGs to really focus on combat. It was also the first MMORPG to prominently feature an equipped items screen to the right-hand side of the display, showing your equipment at a glance. If you fancy a go at surviving in Tibia, it's still playable online, which means it actually holds the honour of being one of the oldest, original, still playable MMORPGs in the world. Number 8. The Realm Online, 1996. Look, you have to understand that this period in time no one actually understood what this genre was, so they were just throwing ideas out there and seeing what stuck. The Realm Online was one of the earliest attempts at making pixel art as graphically pleasing as possible, and believe me, while these graphics may look like trash today, back in 1996 they were absolutely top of the range for an online game. The Realm Online was a 2.5D fantasy game where you walked along static backgrounds to interact with things, be those people or NPCs. It was also the very first game to create and use separate instances of smaller areas for unique players, meaning not all of its world was public. If you're a fan of private instances in MMORPGs, you can thank the Realm Online. Number 7. Meridian 59, 1996. Ask most people what the oldest MMORPG is and they'll say Meridian 59, and in a way they'd be right, but in a much more accurate way they'd be wrong. Meridian 59 was the first fully realised 3D MMORPG, allowing you to explore the world in first person and travel around generic fantasy locations, from castles to quaint villages to maze-like forests. When I say maze-like forests, I mean it. The trees were simply flat surfaces with a green leaf texture, and it was designed exactly like the old Windows Maze screensaver. Meridian 59 was, at the time, a giant leap forward in video game creation, but it arrived so far ahead of its time, sales were dismal, player retention was low, and the gameplay itself was clunky. Not a bad effort for 1996, but not the boost the genre needed. It was closed down, reopened, then closed again. A few private servers sprang up due to a developer leaking the source code, and now it's actually available on Steam. So if you're feeling nostalgic or want to go sightseeing in the oldest 3D MMORPG in the world, Go and download it. Number 6. Baram, known in the West as Nexus Kingdom of the Winds, 1996. Say Nexon to the average person and they'll look at you confused, but say it to an MMORPG history nerd and they'll say, oh, the company who produced such magnificent titles as Final Fantasy XIV, MapleStory and ArcheAge, well, Nexon began way back with this little gem. Released in Korea in 1996 under the name Baram, this top-down tile and sprite game was based heavily on Eastern mythology and was the very first online game to cast you as the role of the super special chosen hero, despite there being thousands of players. So if, like me, you dislike the chosen one trope, you can blame Nexus Kingdom of the Winds. It wouldn't see a Western release for several years, and when it did release in the West, the industry had moved on so much it flew under the radar, but it absolutely dominated Korea for quite some time. In fact, this game is likely the catalyst for the Korean MMORPG craze, so all those Korean grindfests started here. We're halfway through. Remember, if you want a more detailed look at the complete history of the genre, go watch our virtual world, A History of the MMORPG. It's much more comprehensive. At number 5, Legends of Kezmai, 1996. Legends of Kezmai was actually a remaster of an even older game, but it changed enough to be considered a new release, updating the graphics to glorious 16-bit sprites. The game was revolutionary for its time. If you wanted to play it, you had to be with internet provider AOL, but if you weren't, you could join a monthly subscription service called GameStorm and still play, which makes Legends of Kezmai the very first monthly subscription-based MMORPG. Critics at the time said this was an awful idea and no one would pay, but as we know, history has proved them wrong. Number 4. Legends of Future Past, 1992. We're getting into the really old games now, so old in fact this game doesn't even have graphics. It's a text-based multi-user dungeon, or MUD. Now, playing online games back in the day was a complex thing because the open internet as we know it today didn't exist, and games were exclusive to specific internet providers. Imagine if you could only play World of Warcraft if you had Comcast internet, or only play Guild Wars 2 with Virgin internet. It was basically like that. So you'd choose your internet provider based on what games they had available. Legends of Future Past was the very first game to get around this limitation and be available to everyone with a modem, meaning if you could access the internet at all, you could play this game. It was a simple text fantasy adventure, and while it may not look like much, it was the very first MMORPG to include a crafting system. So if you like gathering and then creating stuff from the things you've gathered, you can thank Legends of Future Past. At number 3, Neverwinter Nights, 1991. No, not that Neverwinter Nights, the original Neverwinter Nights. Nope, not that Neverwinter Nights either, the older Neverwinter. Look, gaming companies, this is what happens when you use the same name for a game twice. Looking at you, Medal of Honor, Tomb Raider, and, well, Neverwinter Nights, obviously. The award-winning 2002 Dungeons RPG Neverwinter Nights isn't the original, although it is an amazing game. For the original, we've got to go back to 1991. Described as a graphical adventure game and with a limit of 50 players per server, the game switched between exploration mode, meaning you had a static picture of where you were with some text description, and full-on adrenaline-packed combat mode, which meant you have a tiled view of your sprite and some enemies, and you fight in a turn-based system. Despite not having an in-game guild system, players made guilds and connected through forums. Forums. Remember those? At number 2, Habitat, 1986. In 1986, no one had any idea that video games would become the most popular form of entertainment ever, never mind online games. But one company was brave, or stupid enough, to try and make a large-scale commercial virtual hangout. LucasArts. Yes, the same guys behind such legendary films as The Phantom Menace and Howard the Duck made one of the first MMORPGs. Habitat was a 2D side-scrolling virtual space where players could exist, explore and interact. You could do such exciting things as change your head and talk to other players, but only in short bursts as the text display box wasn't very big, and that's pretty much it. No overarching plot, no big world-ending threat or boss to kill, just a place to be, really. I mean, it was impressive for the time. Also, the original TV trailer for this game is still online. Go and watch it, it's insane. And number 1, the world's oldest MMORPG, the very inception of the genre. Island of Kezmai, 1985. Back in 1980, classmates John Taylor and Kelton Flynn made the offline single-player fantasy game Dungeons of Kezmai, based heavily on Dungeons & Dragons. It used simple ASCII graphics. Then, 5 years later, in 1985, they updated it to Island of Kezmai, hosted it through the CompuServe internet provider, and let multiple players all adventure together. But there are a few things to note. Technically, it was a multi-user dungeon with ASCII graphics, players, enemies, walls, items, all represented by letters or numbers. It was the very first online game to feature item drops, mobs, skills, classes, and leveling up. It's pretty much the birth of the MMORPG genre. But as internet at the time was limited to a 56k download speed, the game would only process one command every 10 seconds. So next time you think a few milliseconds of lag is unplayable, consider waiting 10 seconds for every attack. Thanks for watching. If you played any of these, then let me know in the comments below, and if you want to know even more about the history of the genre up until the modern day, then go and watch our virtual world, A History of the MMORPG. A massive thank you to all my supporters on Patreon and Twitch who make all my content possible, and if you'd like to join the Patreon, Twitch stream, Discord server or Twitter, check the links in the description below. Cheers for your time, and as always, have a great day.